In this video, I'll be discussing how I set up Swagger on my nodejs application. For the benefit of those who don't know what Swagger is, Swagger allows you to describe the structure of your APIs, build them, document, and consume RESTful APIs, which also has to conform with Open API specification. You can write Swagger manually for your API, which is what I'm going to be discussing in this video. But you can also have it to generate automatically according to annotations in your source code. So I have created a simple nodejs application for a product catalog. So I have two endpoints here. This one is the post endpoint and this one is the get. So I'll be using this to demonstrate what I want to do. But first of all, before we set up Swagger, I like to run it so that you can see that the project is working. I'm going to test it from my browser and also from Postman. So Postman is just like Swagger, but it's a standalone application that you can also use to test your APIs. But Swagger offers you tools that you could use to set it up alongside your application so that it is bundled with your application, such that when you give someone the URL to your endpoint, the person can access your endpoint via that URL, right? So it's running, listening on port 3000. So I'll go to localhost port 3000. So on my browser, if I navigate to localhost colon 3000, that's where my project is running. Then when I navigate to the route for the get, which is API/get products, I'll see 3 items that I've already created for this catalog, right? So I'm accessing this directly from the browser URL, but there is so much that this one can do. It can only work for get and delete. It cannot work for create and update. So for us to do that, I would test those two endpoints. I'll test the create endpoints using Postman. Then after that, we'll set up Swagger. So I'm running Postman. I'm going to copy the URL from the browser and post it on Postman. So this is the URL for the get products, and make sure get is selected here. Then I'll click on send. You see it lists the 3 products in the database for me. Now if I want to test for post, I'm going to just duplicate the URL here and just change this to create products. Ensure I select post here and click on since this is a post, we'll have to set up the body of the request. So click on body, click on raw, and this is where we set up the body of the request. Okay, so this is choose JSON so that it will be in JSON format. So enter the first parameter, which is name, and I would call it, I would want to add a product called Microsoft Surface. Select camel case. Okay, then the price, let's say we have 3400. Then we do the quantity. That's quantity again. Quantity to full. Okay. We do quantity and say 4. So send a request. Yeah, so it returns the response, which is the ID of the newly created product and a status code of 200. So this shows that the endpoint is working correctly. So the next thing we're going to do is to set up Swagger so that we can just test our endpoint via our application URL. We don't have to use Postman anymore. Sorry, swagger.io/docs. It will take you to the official documentation for Swagger, and if you click on these helpful links here, it will take you to the documentation itself. So this is the documentation that would help you to set up Swagger. If you're wondering if I had to memorize all of these parameters, no, I did not. Okay, I got it from the documentation, so you could use this documentation as a guide. So any codes you see me typing in the swagger.json file, I'm getting it from here. Okay, so moving on, let's go over back to our editor. So to build our document, our Swagger document, we need to specify the necessary parameters that we need. So to speed things up, I'm just going to paste the code that I've written in Notepad. And I'll go through it from the beginning. So according to the official Swagger documentation, the documentation that you are writing has to start with Open API. This is a required field. It's either it starts with Open API or it starts with Swagger. You should either use the Swagger specification or you use the Open API specification. And if you want to use the Swagger, then you have to start from the version 1.0.0 up to 2.0.0, right? But for the Open API specification, it starts with 3.0.0. So this is a required, and this is what it must start with. This just says that this is the semantic version number of the Open API specification version that the Open API document uses. Okay. The next field is the info, which is what provides more information about your own API. That is the one that we are building. So it provides metadata about the API that we are building. The info is also a required field in the documentation. So inside the info we have the version number. So for me, I'm using 1.0.0 because this is our first API. Then I have the title, which is the product catalog and the description. Then the next one is the host. The next one is the host, which is more like the server and should have the URL of the server on which your application is going to run. So in this case, I'm using localhost on port 3000. That's where my application is running. The next one is the tags, and the tags just provides additional metadata. It's not required, it's optional, so we could add it or decide not to add it. So but I've added it just to provide some more information about API. So I have the name and the description in it since it's an array, so you could add multiple tags. Sorry, you could add multiple tags. And the next one we have is the path. The path is a required field because this is where we define the endpoints in the system in our APIs. So our API endpoints are defined under the path field. So that is why it's a required field. So inside the path would now specify the endpoints one by one. So if we have let me collapse this. So currently I have 2. So as much as you have, you specify all the endpoints in the path. So if you have 7 endpoints, you have to specify 7 of them in here. So let's start from the get. So the first one is the get. This is the URL to my get endpoint, and this URL has to match up with the one we defined in our controller, which is this one. It has to match with the URL in the controller. Then the next thing you have to define is the actual action that you are taking. So this is what Swagger will display for you on the URL. So to tell you if it's a post or a get, so it displays get since you specify get here. Then we'll have the description, the description about our gets, the responses for the gets. So when we make a successful call, we have 200. The description that is going to put for the 200 would be a list of products. Then the next thing is the schema of our response, which is going to be an array because it's going to be a list of products. So that is that for the gets. Then for the post, we have the URL defined, then the action, we'll have the description, then we'll have the request body. This is also required, especially if you're using OpenAPI 3.0.0. This is required, so you have to specify the request body and make it required. Then in the contents part, you have to define the body of the payload. That's the request payload. So for this one, we'll have the name, they'll have the price, and have the quantity, and the various data types. So also have the response for the post, so which is 200, and the type is going to be a string because it's going to return to us the ID of the newly created record. So that is all that we need to do to define the JSON file. So moving on, we'll just test it out and see how it looks on the browser. So we'll run npm start. But before we run npm start, there is something else we need to do. We need to actually inject this file into the application. That is tell Swagger to tell our application to render this Swagger UI for us. So for us to do that, I'll do that in the entry file when I run npm start, the file that is being run first, which is my config.js file. So I would require Swagger UI Express, and let's save that in a constant called Swagger UI. Then the next thing I'm going to do is also define another constant to specify our document, that is a swagger.json file. So we're going to require it 2, and we'll have swagger.json. So because of the location of this file, the location of the swagger.json, we'll have to move 2 steps out to be able to access swagger.json file. Then the next thing we need to do is now to actually inject the document. So the parameters to pass in the app.use, first of all, is the URL, that is Swagger. This is whatever name you choose to give it. This is, so when we run localhost :3000, we can now add /swagger to save us the URL to Swagger. Then Swagger UI dot serve and the setup. Then we can pass in the document. Okay, so now we can run our npm start. can run an npm stats. So we're going to head over to the browser to test it out. So back in our browser, when we open a new tab and we navigate to localhost 3000/swagger, it should load our Swagger documentation. So this is the title that we put under the info, and this is the version of the API, and this is the Open API specification version we specified, which was 3.0.0. Then this was the description we specified in for the title, or for the info rather. Then the users, this is the tag that we specified, the name and the description here. Then for the get endpoint, this is what comes under the path that we specified. Now for the get endpoint, we'll have the description. For the get endpoint, we don't have any parameters. The responses we specified, it was going to be for 200. For a successful response, it's going to be 200, or it is 200. Then the description. So when we click on try it out and click on execute, it returns to us the list of products that we have in the database, right? So this is the array that we specify as type. Then for the post, we also specify the request body, which is this, which shows you an example value, or shows you a schema to follow when you're entering the records. You don't need to type out everything yourself. And also the response 200, the description as okay. Then when we click on try it out, just say okay, we'll call it MacBook, sorry, Mac, I like to type my stuff correctly, MacBook Pro. Let's see some random numbers, quantity is 3, and then we'll click on execute. It creates a new product for us and returns the ID of the newly created product as a string. So we also specify that the response is going to be a string. So that is all that we need to do to define our Swagger, or to set up Swagger in our Node.js application. So we could also refer to documentation, to the official documentation, for more information about setting up. So when you're done with this, you can just give the URL to your application to the user, that is either a client or a front-end developer who is going to consume these APIs. That is after you have deployed this API to production. So you can make the URL available to anyone who needs to consume the endpoint. So this is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like this video, share this video, and also subscribe to this channel for more content.